Okay, we are here at the Hearthstone South Africa Open Side Tournament at the EU Prelims in Joburg. And we are here for the semi-final between Gas and Zamok. I'm Dib, and I've got Nogue here, who's going to be casting with me. So what do you think of these lineups and their respective bans? We see that Gas has banned Zamok's Rogue, and Zamok has banned Gas's Shaman.
From Zamok's point of view, I can understand the Shaman ban, because it kind of like wrecks his lineup. But I'm still confused about why Gas would ban the Rogue.
Yeah, the Rogue is not so great against the Freeze Mage that Gas has. That's kind of like a free win, so if Gas keeps the Freeze Mage, keeps it behind, he can always counter the Rogue with the Freeze Mage. But if he has to play the Freeze Mage, he does kind of lose at some point to Zamok, because Zamok has some decks that are pretty good against Freeze Mage. I mean, the Aggro Shaman is pretty good against Freeze Mage, that's favored. I think Gas's Freeze Mage is actually now in a really awkward position. I think Zamok is favored with the Aggro Shaman, the Hunter, and the Druid. So it's going to be pretty difficult for Gas to actually get a win with his Freeze Mage. I think the same is almost true for the Priest.
So he's just trying to like add the invite. But also another thing is Rogue's got so limited damage besides on the board, and from Gas's lineup he's running 3 control decks. He's got a Tempo Warrior, which has got your armor buff, which does help against Rogue.
Yeah, the Armor Smith is quite nice.
So to me that's just, but we'll see how it goes though.
Yeah, we see the Harrison, which is a tech we chose, because Zamok and I, we built lineups together, so we're running the same lineups. So the Harrison here is a tech we chose to put in. And it is specifically for this Warrior matchup, to make the Warrior better. It also, we were like maybe expecting a little bit of Nzoth Paladin, or some kind of control Paladin, maybe with a new Ivory Knight. And the Harrison is pretty good against that as well.
Yeah, as you see here, I'm just waiting for
Gas's waiting
invite,
for Gas to
so we can only see Zamok's cards at the moment. Fairly decent startup.
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting hand. I mean, there's quite a few decisions to make here. Do you want to coin and innovate the Violet Teacher, which is personally a play I'm a big fan of. The Warrior has almost no way to deal with the Violet Teacher on turn 2. I mean, the best they can do is play a War Axe and hit it twice, but they are taking 9 damage then, and you're in a bit of a tricky position.
As you say, here comes the War Axe now. Also another turn 2 play could have been the Armor Smith, which also doesn't really do anything. Maybe, and you don't really want to waste your execute this early in the game on a Violet Teacher when you know there's big tools coming out later.
I mean, the best he would have had to have is Blood to Ica plus Execute. That's really the only way he could have dealt with it on turn 2. And we see here the Harrison is going to be a big play. Getting both charges on a Fiery War Axe is a lot of value.
That is going to hurt. 5-4 on the board, 3 mana to deal with it.
Okay, now we can finally see Gas's hand. So he did have the Execute. No other way to deal with that Teacher if Zamok had gone for that play, but he is in a really awkward position now. I mean, there's no real nice play here. The best he can probably do is Taskmaster Execute. I mean, that's what he can do to hope to get some tempo back. Because you can't play the Frothing Berserker into this; it just dies for nothing.
It's gonna be a waste, and then next turn maybe Execute, but then
you're
stuck. But you're back on 3 mana again, and then what do you do? Just armor up, dead turn.
Yeah. So I expect we'll probably see the Wild Growth. We could maybe see the Wrath, but I like the Wild Growth because it sets up to play the Teacher plus Raven Idol next turn. And also you need to start getting towards your scenarios. Your hand is full of really awkward spells at this point. And the 2-2 is really not much of a threat on board. Ooh, so this is an interesting decision. Personally, I'm a big fan of the Mulch. So Zamok is running 1 Mulch. But to deal with threats like Rag, Grom, and Varian, which I think Gas is playing. I know you were playing Varian in your Warrior, but I can't remember whether Gas is playing it. The mulch is really nice to deal with those threats, and only having one copy of it in his deck means he would have had to draw a lot of cards to get to it.
Yeah, I didn't really see a point taking the Wisp with the All Guards, especially against, where running all the...
Yeah, running both Whirlwind. So he has one Whirlwind and the 2 Ravaging Ghouls, you see. Yeah, so he also has the Mulk Rock and the Sylvanas and the Cairn, so those are all also decent targets for mulch. I mean, if you can mulch and then play something into a Sylvanas board, that's a pretty big tempo swing.
Yeah, mulch has got a good card, 3 mana. It all just depends on what you give your opponent, So it could all go very wrong, or, I mean...
Yeah, and I mean, mulch, it's also like, it depends on the decks you're playing against. So against mid-range decks, I think it's a little bit worse, because their threats tend to be a little bit more sort of middling in value. But against control decks, sometimes you give them, just a mid-range threat that they can play. It's not that big. Or against something like Freeze Mage, mulch is really good to deal with Doomsayers, because Freeze Mage is almost never going to play whatever random minion you give them. Unless it draws, or is Alexstrasza or Antonidas, they're not going to play it.
No, but you need some serious luck for that to happen. As you see,
Yeah.
Raf comes out 3 damage. Is it?
Yeah,
Should be.
I think so. I don't think there's much value in drawing here. Your hand has already got some decent spells in it. And next turn he's going to be able to play the Maya Keeper or the Violet Teacher Power of the Wild. Personally, I kind of like the Maya Keeper because he wants to ram towards the Scenarios, but we'll see what he chooses to do.
So what do you reckon Gaz is going to play here? Do you think he's going to put out the Taunt, or...?
I think he almost has to play the Taunt. I mean, Battle Rage is no card draw right now, so he needs to get the Bloodhoof Brave out.
Or maybe Throffing Berserker with the armor and hopefully draw something?
No, I don't like that. I mean, it looks like he is going for that. No, okay, he chooses not to armor. Yeah, the main reason I didn't like that was because of the armor up. With the Battle Rage in hand, you really don't want to go above 30 health so that you're not taking any damage. Like, he really just wants 1 damage on himself so that the Battle Rage is at least 1 card draw at all times.
But you see, as this match drags out a bit, the Druid seems a lot more favorable. Because as all that Gaz has at this moment in his hand is basically the Rag. But I mean, that's just going to get mulched away.
Yeah, although it's possible we could see a mulch here, but it really doesn't fit with anything. Like, you can't Maya Keeper and mulch. You can't Violet Teacher and mulch. So I think he probably won't mulch here.
No, sorry, I was saying before the Rag, later on.
No, I know, but what I'm saying is he might be tempted to play it earlier. But now the Power of the Wild and the Violet Teacher is pretty awkward. I mean, a 2/2 is and a 4/6 is not that good against the Frothing Berserker. Neither is the 3/5 and the 3/2. So I think we might just see the Azure Drake because it's the best thing to trade with the Frothing.
It sets up your turn 7 play there.
Yeah. And obviously the draw is nice because he gets a decent play now for the next turn, especially after having seen 1 execute already. Interesting decision here. He opts not to go for the...
I personally would have played
the
Sylvanas.
I mean,
Sylvanas, we know what's coming on turn 7. But
no, but I mean, going into a Druid's turn 7 when he's been holding so many cards in hand, I think it's not unreasonable to believe that he has some kind of big threat. In this case, it was off the top of the deck. So.
Ooh, here comes the early mulch.
I like the mulch here, though. This is a really good tempo mulch because it's allowing him to trade into the Frothing, keep a strong board. So even if the Rag is played here, the Rag isn't that great. And we see next turn, if he plays... Well, actually, he can't even play Rag yet. I mean, he can play Sylvanas. It's not bad here. It kind of forces your opponent to trade the whole board into it, almost.
I reckon next turn, if he plays Violet Teacher into Power of the Wild, it could be like, oh wow.
The Violet Teacher into Power of the Wild is really, really strong. In fact, now it's probably a bit better to play the Living Roots because you can get a really good trade on this 7/7. Because with the Power of the Wild and the Living Roots, you can trade your 3/3, which will be a 4/4, plus the 3 damage from the Living Roots. So you're only trading 1 minion into a 7/7 and generating a really big board right before turn 8, which, the only threat that is really scaring you at this point is the Rag. Obviously, he needs to play the Living Roots first here in order to get the extra 1/1 on the Power of the Wild. If he chooses to go that route, he might just play 2 Power of the Wilds.
I think he's thinking Power of the Wild. You can't just play 1.
Yeah, he must be thinking to
if he was planning on doing the roots, he would have played them first, though.
Yeah.
I think he's just going to ignore the
I would have actually
7/7.
preferred him to play the first Power of the Wild as a 2/2 then.
Oh, there you
Okay.
go.
So I think he didn't realize the living roots was 3 damage, and he's chosen to do it like this. Now,
This is
but
actually some sensible play, yeah.
yeah, I mean, okay, he's missed out on +1/+1 buff on one of his apprentices, which, you know, could be pretty important, but we'll see.
Yeah, and we should probably see scenarios now with the 2-2, what is it, 2-2
Yeah,
buff?
the 2/2 buff. I mean, you can
That
set
is-
him really low.
That is
and
crazy.
It is. It's pretty insane here. It's an extra 10 damage this turn. So
Even with Sylvanas, I mean, you've got so many minions left
yeah,
afterwards.
I mean,
it's just...
you would need Brawl in this situation to actually make this Sylvanas useful. So, but because he knows he's playing a Tempo Warrior, he knows the exact deck list.
That 1 minute damage he missed early on now.
Yeah, it's punishing him. He would have had lethal this turn if he had played the Living Roots before the Power of the Wild. I mean, it's not going to punish him in the sense that
He'll
he's
lose
not
the
going to win the game,
Yeah,
but it's punishing him in the sense that he really should have won the game already.
If Gas had a Brawl, it would have been a completely different story now.
Yeah, if Gas had some crazy way of getting it out, which I don't think he does, but if he did, then it could have punished Zaymok.
This should be done.
Personally, I think this is the biggest matchup in this series. I think Gas's best chance of winning the series is to sweep with the sweep with the Tempo Warrior. And now that the Tempo Warrior is out, I think he's going to struggle to win, you know, two times with either his Freeze Mage or his Priest, because he now has to win twice with at least one of those decks.
Yeah, which one do you think he's going to choose next? Stick on the Druid.
Stick on the Druid. I think he probably chooses the Freeze. I think the Priest is a little bit awkward versus the Druid. But this is a similar situation now to what happened in my Swiss round matchup against Gas. What happened was I won with the Druid and then proceeded to 3-0 with the Druid. But even from this situation where the Warrior is out, I think Gas is in a really rough position. So what do you think he'll pick?
I think I'll just go Freeze Mage. I think he's quite confident with his Priest. I think that's his like... Or maybe he's a bit, you know, a bit rattled, a bit tilted now, and maybe he'll go for the, you know, the class he knows best, which is his Priest.
Yeah.
But then you get against Druid, it's a bit awkward.
So how do you think this Priest will do against the Druid? I mean, I have not played this Priest very much. I'm not really much of a Priest player.
No, same here. I also don't have a lot of good luck with Priest. Oh, so we do see the Priest coming out. Harrison Jones, they're quite a dead card.
Yeah, very dead. I mean, I
Except for the
definitely
basic
expect it to
value,
be
yeah.
mulliganed away.
Yeah, he's got Power Word Death, which could do all the big taunts and all that. You've got your, how can I say, your Entomb. Maybe. It depends on the draw, eh?
I mean, so I think as the Druid, you really don't want to innovate something out into his turn 6 to play around the Entomb, because that's a really big play. Like if you dump your hand to innovate something out on right into your opponent's turn 6, that can be really punishing.
I think the best chance the Druid's going to have here is going to have a lot of like small minions, but like 3/2s, 2/2s on the board, and just try and like flood it.
Yeah.
But then again, on turn 5, you also run the risk of running into an Excavated Evil?
Yeah, but he's only running one Excavated Evil, I believe. So...
but you also have your Anarchy Soul Priest with your... You see there's 2 healing circles in his hand.
yeah, he's running one Excavated Evil, and then the only other board clear he has is the Orkanai Circle Healing combo. Well, okay, other than the Pyromancer, which is obviously good for clearing the tokens of Druid. That might be the reason he's chosen to take Priest here, I think. Maybe he feels that it's going to be the best against the token-orientated threats that the Druid tends to play at times. But the Druid can really go two ways. Sometimes the Druid plays singular big threats, and sometimes the Druid just spreads the board really wide. It's one of the things I really like about this Druid deck, is that it's quite versatile in how you want to actually present your threats.
But unfortunately, the Priest has got methods of dealing with both of those. Can deal
Yeah.
with a full board, can deal with a single target.
And I like Zaymok's choice not to use Living Roots on turn 1, which might have seemed like a mana efficient play, but it's really bad going into a Northshire Cleric. You don't want to give him the draw, and it probably doesn't do much because they probably just get Pyromancered at some point. So you really want to use the Living Roots to maybe respond to Northshire Cleric, because you can Living Roots Hero Power on turn 3 or something like that.
Yeah, you're going to keep it for the damage rather than...
Yeah. And we see just a Naked Soul Priest just for tempo here. I like it. It's a pretty decent play. I mean, we can see Living Roots plus Wrath to clear here. It's a bit awkward. He might instead just opt to save, do nothing this turn, or maybe just play the Maya Keeper out. So if you play the Maya Keeper, take the mana. What happens next turn is you can play Fandral plus Living Roots Wrath Innovate. So you're getting pretty good value from your Fandral, and you're setting up into Ancient of War on 7 if he doesn't deal with your Fandral. Because if your Fandral isn't dealt with, that's going to be a 10-10 Ancient of War on 7. Well, on your 6, but actually 7.
10-10 Ancient of War is quite difficult to deal with, but we do see the Shadow Word Death there in Gas's hand, so...
Yeah, and the Shadow Word Pain, more importantly for the Fandral, which is huge if he chooses not to use it here. I think it's probably better to just take the trade here, like 90% of the time.
What I like about this play now, whatever the Druid plays, Gas has got two damage in his hand, or 2 damage with his hero power. That can deal with quite a lot of stuff. Oh, there we see that.
I mean, look, I still think Zemok has to do this, at least the Wrath here, because, you know, it draws a card. That's pretty decent. The Living Roots now is awkward. I mean, just to innovate out the Living Roots doesn't really feel good. Especially when, if he deals with this Fandral, he can then innovate out scenarios, which is pretty decent. Okay, so he chooses to go for Resurrect. I think the only minion that had there was 2 minions that had died there so far, and either of them would have been okay. I mean, if he resurrected the Soul Priest, he could have used Circular Healing and Hero Power to clear there instead of having to use the Shadow Word Pain. Or if he resurrected the Loot Hoarder, obviously it's just draw. And I remember in my games against Gas, most of the time he ended up just resurrecting Loot Hoarders. So I think, you know, in some ways he sees that card as just 2 mana, draw a card, essentially.
It also helps him to cycle through his deck faster a bit.
Yeah.
Generally, Priest doesn't have all too much card draw, or none at all besides from the Loot Hoarders. But it seems to have been working for him at the moment. Yeah,
so Zemok's hand here is very interesting. How he wants to choose to play out his threats is quite interesting. He can... He has to assume maybe his opponent has one Shadow Word Death now. But if he has one Shadow Word Death, he could make it really awkward for his opponent by just playing Sylvanas here, because if he Shadow Word Deaths, he gives him the card draw. It's not really what he wants to do. He would then have to trade first, then Shadow Word Death, and then he's probably not doing too much on that turn. Or he could play the Ancient of War here, or he can just spread the board like this, which is gonna... Okay, so he wants to go for the Soul of the Forest play. It's the one way of spreading the board without making yourself too weak to the removal, because now the Priest, which has only 3 ways of really doing a board clear, and he's already seen 1 Orcanized, so there's only really 2 ways of board clearing, other than the Pyromancer, and he now needs at least 2 sets of board clears, or 3 procs on a Pyromancer to clear the board.
Yeah, you don't really want to kill these Living Roots, because the 1/1s turn into 2/2s, but I mean...
But you have to clear them at some point in order to enable you to clear the 2/2s. If you just let these sit on the board, he will eventually trade them off for really good value.
I think this is a very good play, because if they stick to the board next turn, you can just play scenario, or innovate scenarios, which will give them
the buff them to 3/3s, and then you're really forcing your opponent to kill them.
Even if he does play the... what is it? Wild Pyromancer, Excavate, I'm not sure it can work out for him that well.
Yeah. That might be what he's trying to set up for next turn.
This is not...
Oh, the Power of the Wild is also really nice here. So he could also just play his own Sylvanas and Power of the Wild, but that's a bit tricky, because if he steals your Sylvanas, that feels bad. If you're going to do that, you might actually play Sylvanas second after the Power of the Wild, so you only leave a 5/5 Sylvanas rather than a 6/6.
Yeah, you don't...
I mean, he really doesn't want to play the Ancient of War into this.
That would have been very bad. If Sylvanas taps your Sylvanas and steals it.
Yeah, I think the scenario is he might even play it for the 2/2s. What do you think of that?
I like the Power of the Wild Sylvanas player in that order. Sylvanas on the other side has a general chance of only stealing one of your saplings, which will then be only a 2/2.
Yeah.
And you also have your Sylvanas to counter whatever he does. It is turn 6, so we can expect maybe Entomb. Well, Zemok can expect an Entomb. We know what's going on. But I mean, 6 cards in the hand, you must expect something.
Entomb might be the reason he doesn't want to play the Sylvanas here. That's definitely a way of thinking about this. I agree that I would have liked to see it. I agree not in this order, and I would have also liked to see him trade one of the 1/1s into the Loot Hoarder before casting the Power of the Wild. If he wasn't, especially if he's going to trade now, because now he's lost out on 1 stats again. And, I mean, he gained 1 stats on the Sylvanas, which is not necessarily a good thing. From Gas's perspective,
Well, maybe it is. Maybe it is if you think about it. Because if he only had a Sylvanas, straight into Sylvanas, he would have stole something from him, and Zaymok's Sylvanas would have gone dead.
yeah.
So maybe now, if the Sylvanas does the trade and steals one of the 2/2s, then
Now
he still has his
Yeah.
Sylvanas on his side. So
Yeah,
I think
there
that-
is that way of thinking about it. Now he's at least forcing his opponent to death as Sylvanas or something, which allows his Ancient of War and scenarios to be better.
yeah, but I do agree with you on the 2/2 there. Should have traded the loot order first and then get the value for the.
I
for
mean,
the extra.
yeah, the only argument you can make for that is that if he steals it, it's a worse minion. But I think that's negligible.
What do you think's going through Gas's mind here? Obviously, he wants to clear, but he's got quite a few options here.
Yeah, he has the death, but
Ah,
he might go for the Pyromancer because after he trades the Sylvanas, okay. So if he plays 2 spells here,
that is.
oh no, it's not going to kill his. Oh, he's going to death his own Sylvanas. Okay. So by deathing his own Sylvanas, he is guaranteed to steal a 2/2 or the Sylvanas. So he has a. Ah, that's awkward. Okay,
Steal the
yeah,
one, steal
yeah.
the
Sorry, the sequencing there is quite weird. You know, I thought that the Pyromancer would proc first and kill off the 1 health minions, but in fact, it hasn't, and it has set Gas in a really awkward position. Those 2 4/4s are going to be very awkward for him to deal with. He's already seen 1 Soul Priest and 1 Circle of Healing. That's kind of the only way he deals with this board. It's like Soul Priest, Circle of Healing plus Shadow Word Death, and even then it leaves him on 8, leaves him with a 5/8, or if he chooses to death, or if he deaths the Sylvanas, he just steals the Soul Priest. So
I don't see Gas coming back from this now.
no,
It's too.
there's really no way for him to deal with this board and heal out of range. He would have needed maybe a flash heal or multiple flash heals just to stay out of range. But even if he stays out of range for 1 turn, he's in a really bad position.
You would need about a Soul Priest right now, to be honest.
Yeah, but even the Soul Priest doesn't really do it. Like, if you can't kill the Sylvanas, because then it steals your Soul Priest, unless you have to kill your own Soul Priest. But it's just really awkward. Like, if he had both Circle of Healings and Soul Priest, that would have worked out. Because then he could have dealt 8 damage to the board and cleared both minions. That's literally the only way I think he could have cleared this board.
What do we see here?
This is just Gas giving up in a creative way. I think you can see his frustration coming through. You know, like just throwing out spells in a very like frustrated manner. And I mean, we're still going to see Zaymok taking this game, which once again I think is putting him in a pretty good position. With only Gas's Freeze Mage left, there's only really one deck that Freeze Mage is now favored against Zaymok, and that's the Rogue. So we're likely to see Zaymok play. Well, obviously he has to play the Druid now against the Freeze Mage, and then even if he loses that game, I believe he'll probably just play the Hunter, which is pretty favored, I think, against the Freeze Mage.
Yeah, I can't play Freeze Mage.
Ah.
Since they removed the Mad Scientist.
Yeah, it's become a lot less consistent because it's a lot harder to get your secrets out now.
Yeah, you got to keep them in hand, and you got to know when to actually like. I don't know.
Yeah, it has become a very much different deck to play. Personally, I'm a big fan of the Reno Freeze, which still plays maybe 7 or 8 doubles, but has Reno to help again the mid-range matchups, which we see at the moment the meta is very, very mid-range heavy.
So we got Zaymok leading Gas 2-0. This is going to determine who's get the coin.
Yeah, I mean this will
true.
determine who the finalist is going to be that's going to go up against Epsilon.
What would you keep the starting hand from Druid? Yeah.
No. Nourish is actually not bad against Freeze Mage, but I think you probably maybe keep 1 Innovate and a Wild Growth, because if you can innovate out a Fandral or a Teacher, it can be difficult for Freeze Mage to deal with. They don't have many ways to deal with that, other than just a Doomsayer and hoping you don't have an answer.
I would actually try. This is not a bad adding. It's a Freeze Mage. You know, the Freeze Mage is going to come out quite very slowly. You've got your. Obviously, you don't want to innovate into Nourish, because what do you do then? Do you take card draw or do you go Mana Crystals?
Yeah, especially when you already have the Wild Growth in hand. I mean, I think there's definitely an argument for keeping the Nourish, but to keep both Innovates, I don't think you can keep both Innovates and the Wild Growth. I think you have to choose here. And I think the Wild Growth is more consistent.
He's going to keep it.
He's going to keep it all. He obviously has some weird Druid game plan here, because But we see a handful of spells, and there's no Yogg in this Druid, so it's not like, he's going to be able to play an early Yogg and hope that plays multiple Call of the Wilds to generate him a board.
Does this version of his Druid run Emperor Thrasan?
Yes.
Okay,
so I mean, that is definitely one of the things that could have been a consideration, because if you innovate out a Thrasan on turn 1, like, it's very difficult for the Freeze Mage to win from that situation.
Yeah, but you also want your, like in the previous game, you want your board spread out, you want your Death Rattles on for Soul of the Forest.
Yeah, Soul of the Forest is such a huge card. I remember in my game against Gas, I basically played a Soul of Forest into his already played Doomsayer, just leave me with a board, to leave me with a board of like 4 2/2s, which is, better than nothing. So he has a few choices here. Obviously, because he has Innovate, he has many choices, really. He can play almost anything in his hand.
It's a problem. I don't think he knows what to play. It's too many options.
Yeah, okay, so he's going for the gain 2. Oh, no, for the draw 3. Okay,
You've got to innovate. You don't need... If something comes... What's
Yeah.
the worst the mage is going to do? Play another Loot Hoarder at this stage.
Yeah, I really like this. So his hand is now set up really beautifully. So he can play next turn, Innovate Ancient of War, and then play Sylvanas, and then play Innovate Onyxia if his opponent manages to clear that board, or he can play another Ancient of War. It also leaves him with Swipe, Living Roots plus Hero Power to deal with a Doomsayer, which is a really good way, because when he's going to be committing to this big board, what he needs to be able to deal with is a Doomsayer. If he can deal with the Doomsayer, I think he can win from a big board like that.
But as you see in Gas's hand, he doesn't really have anything he wants to play at this stage. So if Zamok can get some big minions,
card draw.
If Zamok can get some big minions out, it's going to force
Personally,
Gas to waste
I
some
would
of
have
his spells here.
I would definitely have liked to have seen Gas play the one of the secrets there. I feel like you're going to be under pressure, at some point soon. The Druid just drew a bunch of cards. He's probably going to play a threat. You're not going to get a better time to play the secret than last turn.
And here we see the Doomsayer in hand.
So I would have liked to have seen him play an Ice Barrier because he has 2 in hand.
The Druid's got no way of getting rid of your spells except for actually triggering them. So
Yeah.
I think there was some mana gone to waste there.
Yeah, I mean, the 1 damage ping on the Druid at this point is probably not consequential, because your hand is not telling you that you can actually really do the burn plan. I mean, you might have double Fireball Ice Lance, but that's not going to be enough damage against the Druid. So you need something like Alexstrasza, and if you're going to Alexstrasza, you're not going to ping anyway. You're only going to ping off the armor from Shapeshift. But pinging to actually just reduce health, which I'm not a big fan of. And we see now he's actually just going for the...
So now you're doing a turn too late.
Yeah, I mean,
This could
he's
have
more
been-
mana efficient like this. Actually, he's less, because last turn he just floated 2 mana instead of this turn.
Right.
He might have floated some mana.
You could have played his Ice Block by now. You've
Yeah,
got your secret set. You can just now focus on clearing board and...
I mean, it's almost like he was assuming Zamok wasn't going to play anything that turn. If he didn't play anything, then that play worked out. But I think it's almost impossible that Zamok didn't play anything after Nourishing there.
Yeah, after the Nourish game, you up against Druid, he's got 6 mana.
Yeah,
8
I mean,
cards in hand. Yeah, something's coming out.
well, it was 5 mana the last turn, but yeah. I mean, there's not a lot of 5 drops in this Druid. No Druid of the Claws and stuff, importantly.
Maybe.
Clearly Astral Communion, right? 100%, man. Got a meme. Get that 4 mana. No.
I'll just take the Nourish and buff for crystals. Because, I mean, Living Roots, no, you've got one in your hand, you've got your Onyxia out, you want your mana.
Yeah, I like the crystals as well. It gives you the chance to just play Onyxia or Cenarius next turn, and it's going to put the mage under a lot of threat.
He sees it differently, though.
Yeah, I think he sees the Living Roots as another way to help deal with the Doomsayer. So what could be a problem now from Zamok is if Gas plays Doomsayer plus Frostnova plus Ice Lance on face. Zamok would have no way to deal with the Doomsayer, and he would be in a lot of pressure. But now with the double Living Roots, he can deal with Doomsayer from hand at any point. So
without having to use his own Hero Power.
Yeah, Zamok and I have played a lot of Freeze Mage, and he's a pretty experienced Freeze Mage player, so I expect him to know exactly what kind of things that Gas can really use as an out here. So that's definitely helping him a lot in this matchup.
Unfortunately for Gas, he's got no way of freezing these taunts, so the Doomslayer will be pretty much useless there. We'll just take a knock from one of the Ancient of Wars and Living Roots.
Yeah.
As you see the Fandral come out here.
Yeah, I mean, you're probably going to play the Fandral here. Just Hero Power down the Loot Hoarder. Or even just choose to hero power face, maybe.
Well, it was kind of safe to assume that he didn't have, you know, the Doomslayer
Yeah.
Frost
I mean,
Nova combo, because he would have played it the previous time,
yeah.
I'm sure.
I don't hate hero powering face here. Yeah, I like it. Because there's no real reason to kill the loot order. There's no reason to take the extra 1 damage to face. And it's like a 3 health swing like this. Instead of taking the 1 damage, you're gaining 1 damage. Well, so 2 health swing. Which is really nice against Freeze Mage. Because I think what Zamox sees as the only way Gas is going to win from here is to like constantly freeze the board and play out his like Alexstrasza plus burn. That's pretty much the only way Gas is going to win. Or to just straight up burn. I think that's probably the more likely reason that Zamox chose not to kill the loot order off there.
Now, I also would have left the loot order up. There's no point in killing it. It can't take out your taunts.
Yeah, and even dealing 2 damage to your taunts is not really that consequential, you know.
He was going to trade it anyway, so...
I mean, it doesn't put them in fireball range or anything like that. I mean, we see Gas is still at 30 HP, but with 13 damage on board for Zamox, I think he's in a pretty comfortable position.
Both ice barriers gone now. So
Yeah.
the ice blocks leave...
So the thing is, Zamox can never play the Sylvanas now. That Sylvanas is a dead card in hand, because Sylvanas just pretty much loses you the game, because Fireball plus Doomsayer wipes your board, because you force your opponent to steal the Doomsayer, and then the game is pretty much over at that stage. Because if you lose a board like this, you're in a lot of trouble. And we see the Zodrak, a really nice minion to help fill out his curve. You know, getting more threats on board, plus the draw is pretty huge here. And that the Thaurissan for next turn is going to be really good.
It's going to force Gas to make some plays now. You can't just sit back anymore.
Yeah, I think he probably has to Blizzard.
But even then...
He has 2 Blizzards in the deck, no Flame Strike. So, you know, the best he can probably do is Blizzard Doomsayer here and hope that his opponent can't deal with it. But this is exactly what Zamox has picked out Living Roofs for earlier. I mean, the spell power would have helped anyway, but regardless, he knew he could deal with the... Okay, so Gas is going for the aggressive plan. He says he has an Ice Block in hand and a bunch of burns, so he thinks he can win in like 3 turns, because he has at least 3 turns.
Yeah, we've been focusing so much on Zamox's attack here that we actually haven't, like, you know...
Yeah, I looked at the hand from Gas, which is actually really good. Now that he drew those 2 Frostbolts, he has the... So 2 Frostbolts plus the Ice Lance, that's 6, 10...
18, 22
22 damage, yeah.
So that ping to face makes sense a bit now.
Yeah, now the ping to face is working out. But I mean, that's only because he drew the 2 Frostbolts.
Another Ice Lance here and it should be done.
Yeah, so we'll see Gas set... I mean, Zamox set Gas to 1 health. Yeah, smartly attacking with his hero power before swiping, because the swipe is now 2 damage. It would have procced the Ice Block at 2 instead of 1. But I think it's also important he deals with the Thaurissan. It reduces a lot of the even more ridiculous combos of spells that he could use. We see Gas can stall for 1 turn more with the Ice Block, but the freezes are not going to be enough because he's at 1 health. He would have to freeze his opponent's face. So maybe if he could go for the risky play here of just playing Blizzard plus Frostbolt on his opponent's face. Oh, you can even play the Ice Block as well with that. So it's working out quite well. So that's actually not that risky.
What do you say?
Yeah, so he has the Doomsayer as well. So I actually think what could be a really good play from him would have maybe been... It's a little bit risky because if your opponent has damage in hand, you're going to lose the game. But if you play Blizzard with the Doomsayer and Frostbolt face, you can set it up so that he has to have damage in hand to win the game. The way he's setting it up now, he's not able to play the Doomsayer with the... Oh no, he is able to play the Doomsayer. What am I talking about? Okay. So instead he's actually just trying to hope for maybe like a Thalnos off the top. That would give him enough damage to win next turn.
So how much damage does he have in hand there? It's 3, 6...
I think
10 with ping 11. Oh, he's gonna be...
and so Zamox is only playing 1 Raven Idol, so there's no chance of him getting another Raven Idol into some sort of healing mechanism, you know, Feral Rage or Healing Touch or something, which is actually pretty important in this matchup. Unfortunately, the Wrath, because of Fandral and the spell power, will kill any of his minions except the Ancient of Wars if he plays it on them. So obviously, you just play the Wild Growth for draw first.
So Gas basically only needs 2 damage. Either Spell,
Or
Firepower,
Thalnos.
or what is that? Frost Lance.
Yeah, he's got 1 Ice Lance, 1 Forgotten Torch. There's 1 Forgotten Torch in his deck. So his outs at this point are Forgotten Torch, Ice Lance, and Thalnos, I believe. Or, yeah, no, that's all.
And what do we see?
Loot Order. So
It's
he
not
has the
too
mana
bad.
to play Loot Order Ping. That's 4. Yeah, he has enough mana that he can still get any of those outs. So I think he pretty much has to go for that, to play the Loot Order and ping his own Loot Order. Because he'll then he has 3 mana in hand, he'll have 6, so even Forgotten Torch, which is the most expensive of his outs, he would still be able to play. And unfortunately for him, just an Acolyte. So now he has to go for the risk of hoping his opponent doesn't have any damage in hand by playing Frostbolt on his opponent's face and then Blizzard. Or maybe he's just going to do the concede play because now he can't play the... I mean, I don't like that. I think Gas had an out there. I think maybe he's a little bit tilted. You know, you got to take, even if it's at least like a 5% out, you got to at least try and take that 5% out. But now, there's nothing he can do. Cone of Cold is not enough.
Yeah, he's not giving
And
himself,
Blizzard, he doesn't have enough mana for Blizzard.
yeah, he's not giving himself any chance here.
Yeah, rather at least give himself the like 5% chance. Just throwing out cards, you know, in frustration before he concedes. So we see Zaymok winning 3-0 with Druid, which I think his lineup was pretty well favored against Gas's. I think the biggest, the most important match we saw in that series was the Tempo Warrior game. I think if Gas lost that Tempo Warrior game, he was always going to be in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was just a bit tilted at giving up there in most of the games. Druid is a difficult class to play up against. It doesn't have a lot of favorable matches, but it also doesn't have a lot of weakness. So, because it can deal with a lot of things, and it can also give a lot of things.
Yeah,
whether
I mean,
it's single target, high single targets, or whether it's spread out on a board.
yeah, it is very versatile in that sense, and it can be very hard to predict because it has the weird, the weird curves with the Maya Keepers, the Wild Growths, and of course Innovate. You can never forget Innovate.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's all from our semi-final here. We'll see Zaymok versus Epsilon in the grand final soon. Thanks for tuning in, and stick around. Hopefully the grand final will be up soon. Thanks a lot. From me, Dib, and big shout out to our sponsors, of course, IS, who are hosting us basically in their chill room venue here. And I mean, the internet's obviously been, superb the whole time, as you would hope. So big shout out to the admins and obviously the sponsors as well.
Yeah. See you guys later for hopefully a good match.